Hola, welcome back, ¿qué tal? Okay, great to see some familiar faces in the audience. Jono, I'm looking at your good self there. My name's Oisín Lunny. If we haven't met before, I'm a podcast host for Fortune 500 companies and a journalist and stage MC and an occasional DJ. And if we connect on LinkedIn, I will send you a mixtape because that's how I roll. It's been working for me for now until now. It is great to be here. We have had such an exciting program here at the Agora stage all day at 4 years from now, 22. I hope you've had a good time. I hope you made some connections. I hope you've learned some new stuff. And I hope you're sharing the love on social media. Please feel free to take photographs of our incredible speakers. Share it on social media. Maybe use a quote, tag them, and use the hashtag 4YFN22 as you prefer. Okay, we have a treat for you now. You're going to meet a company that went from startup to scale up and managed to raise 100 million in their latest funding rounds. They've grown to over 500 people in 4 different continents, and you're going to meet their CEO to talk about things like hyper-growth in the process of hiring, operations and culture, comparing organic and inorganic growth. But first, I'm going to introduce you to our amazing moderator. He is the founder and CEO at Mars-based, a high-end development consultancy from Barcelona, specialized in web and mobile applications developed on Ruby on Rails and JavaScript. I see some heads nodding. People know what that means. That's awesome. So he's also the chapter director of Startup Grind Barcelona. And when you connect to him on LinkedIn, or if you visit him on the 4 Years From Now website, you'll see that he's sitting there with a bass guitar. So he knows a thing or two about music, which is awesome as well. So I'd love for you to give a very warm 4 Years From Now welcome to the founder and CEO at Mars-based, Alex Rodriguez Bacardi. Thank you.
Well, hello. Thank you, everybody, for being here. No introduction needed for this gentleman over here. We've known each other since he was the CTO at Red Booth. I think one of the remarkable things that he's done is that he's a serial founder. So we're not talking about a company that it's the first time he's creating a company. He's not a first-time entrepreneur. So Jordi, my first question for you would be like, what have you taken from previous companies, from founding Idnik and being the CTO from Red Booth and whatnot, to what have you taken into Factorial this time?
Well, thank you, Alex. So lots of learnings, some positive, some negative. I guess the more painful learnings and most expensive learnings had to do with investors. We made a lot of mistakes with venture capital in our first startup at Red Booth, where the board fired the founding CEO, the investors started running the company, making a lot of decisions, and then this doesn't end up well in most cases. The best learnings we took from that was team building, right? So our ability to create an exceptional team, a very strong culture, and the fact that we were able to actually hire many of those for our following ventures was the proof that this learning was extremely valuable.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because things in startups and business in general, they go really slow until they go really fast, right? So maybe when we was the first company, you probably couldn't forecast that you raise a big Series A, something like that, and then all of a sudden you have to hire 100 people overnight, right? Whereas this time around, you had the previous experience. So when did you start planning? For instance, you've raised funds recently, a very big round. So how far ahead do you have to plan for that before hitting the hypergrowth?
So I guess about being slow and fast, I think I prefer to always go fast. The problem is you go fast in the wrong direction until you find the right direction, right? So you go very fast and then you have to come back and start over and stuff like that.
You need to reevaluate.
But maybe you don't slow down. I think slow kills startups. So you always need speed. You always need, try to achieve growth. You don't always achieve it. When it comes to stages, I think it's very helpful. One tip I learned a while ago was to always write a potential deck or an outline for a deck for whatever your next milestone is, right? So when we start the 2022 year, I start thinking about our 2023 strategy and outline, what we want to achieve then, so we can start preparing for what we need to build there. And in past experience, when we raised our seed round, one of the few good tips that investors gave us back then was start working on the Series A deck. So you should know what you want to be able to say, and then you know what's the delta. And when you're getting close, you're ready for fundraising. Rather than, crap, I'm out of money, I need to raise money, I have no idea if I'm ready, or everything's going well, but I don't know if that's what investors are looking for and stuff like that, right? So if you have this draft or this outline of what the next milestone is going to look like, it helps you prioritize a lot. And you just convert this into OKRs, goals, or priorities in general.
And how can you recalibrate the starting dates of this new stage of the company? Because sometimes investment rounds, they get pushed back. Then maybe there's a pandemic going on, things like that. They force you to recalibrate, right? So maybe you have some people ready to go, ready to hire, but because you cannot complete, you don't get the last signature, maybe you are not able to complete that process. You cannot kickstart that process. So how can you recalibrate the expectations of people? How do you manage this?
So expectation setting is probably top 5 priorities of a startup founder, because you always want to set very high expectations. But as I said, maybe you were going in the wrong direction, so you have to recalibrate these expectations. Maybe not because of an external event like a pandemic or a failed fundraise. Sometimes it's just you didn't find the right business model, like we didn't for the first 3 years, or your product doesn't live up to expectations or something like that. So expectation setting is something you do constantly. I guess when it comes to fundraising, my personal strategy is to keep it very private. We don't talk to the team about our idea to fundraise.
So only C-levels?
We keep it, until very recently, only founders.
Only founders, okay.
Only founders and existing shareholders. Like by law, you have to share with these people that you want to raise money. But I'm very private with these things because it's a distraction and it creates what you say, right? These parallel universes. There is this universe where we have 2 months of runway, we have almost no cash in the bank, and we need to succeed. And there is this universe where maybe we have tens or hundreds of millions of dollars and we need to deploy them wisely. So I don't like creating multiple universes for the team. We want to have only one reality. It's just that then it changes very fast when you announce it. And I try to announce it when the money's in the bank. So it's pretty late in the process. It means you signed the term sheet, you've done the due diligence, you've signed the actual contract, and you waited for the funds to arrive, and then we announce it. In the last round, we couldn't wait so long because the rumor was starting to spread. But we announced it when it was already completely signed.
How do you tackle a rumor? Because you certainly you don't want this kind of information to be leaked to the company, but if it's so evident, it's kind of counterproductive not to say it to the team because they know it almost for a fact. And if you pride yourself in being a transparent company or highly communicative company, you really have to say it, right? But on the other hand, maybe you don't want to share too much because that creates expectations. Things might not happen. And so there's drawbacks also to these.
I unfortunately am old enough that I've seen many rounds, many fundraisings fall and go to nothing, like hours or minutes before the signing. Wow. So I'm very careful of not sharing something until I know for sure that it's done, and that means money in the bank. So you mentioned transparency, which is interesting, right? Because you say that, and I feel attacked. Like, okay, we're not transparent because I'm not sharing.
No,
but that's fair. Until the time that it's closed. So it made me think, when does transparency matter, right?
Correct.
So in my opinion, transparency means sharing the rationale for decisions, like explaining to people why decisions are made. It doesn't mean everything needs to be public. If you're about to let go somebody, that's a very personal topic. It affects one person. I'm not transparent about this. I first tell the person, I make sure this person has a chance to tell to their direct team, and then I share with the rest of the people, not details about how this went, but why we took the decision, right? And I even try to wait a week and separate it from the person because I'm not trying to do anything to that person, but I'm trying to build a culture and create a learning from this fighting because that was an opportunity to learn, which is something you need to do a lot in fast-growing startups. And what was the other part of the question I missed?
How do you tackle the rumor? How do you,
rumors.
How do you kind of kill it or play it down? Did you gather an all-hands session with the founding team? Or?
Yeah. So usually the opposite. In very few occasions, I tackle the rumor front-facing it and telling everybody, I know there's this rumor going on and this is what's happening. It would need to be very extreme for me to do that. Generally, what I think is most productive for us is leverage the one-on-one relationships of managers, right? And this is one of my obsessions right now. Is as we scale, working with the managers, right? So when there is a rumor, I go to my team, the leadership team, and I tell them, look, we are all hearing, and usually I'm the last one to hear about the rumor, right? I'm the slowest person to hear about the rumor.
People don't talk to the CEO. You're kind of like the cult leader, right?
It's just, no, not because of that, but because we're many people. So anyway, when the rumor gets to us as a leadership team, we say, okay, this is a problem. We don't like rumors because it creates uncertainty, it creates confusion. So you are all tasked with going to your direct reports, your directors or next level managers, depending on how large the organization is, and make sure you tackle them privately. So we're not fueling the rumor, but we're sharing the truth in a private way. And when the time's right, we celebrate and we pretend nobody knew.
I like
because it's also fun to celebrate, right?
It is fun to celebrate. And I like what you said here because, in our company, for instance, we pride ourselves in transparency. But to your point, I agree that transparency is also separating signal from noise, right? And so if you are over-communicative, that might be counterproductive to the company, might kill the company or the team vibes or all the positive dynamics. Just to settle the expectations here, how many people in the audience are hiring for tech talent? Developers, looking for a CTO? Okay, let's go into that because I think we can provide some technical insights here. From technical CEO to technical CEO, right? Once you hit super growth stage, hyper growth stage, what are the things that you have seen that are breaking right now that you didn't expect, that you couldn't foresee from your experience in previous companies in the technical department or hiring for technical people?
So I'm very lucky because my CTO is my very good friend and co-founder. So I hired him, I guess, but long time ago, right? So when we started the company, we had a very strong CTO, and I see a lot of entrepreneurs struggling to find a co-founding CTO or an early stage CTO. So we were kind of okay for a while, for the first 3 years, 4 years of the company. Now we're 5 years in, we're 570 people today, and our tech team is almost 100 people. So we're actually hiring a bunch of CTOs, but we just call them directors. Director of this team, director of this area, but we actually look for CTOs. And it's really hard. I'm trying not to curse. It's really hard to hire CTOs. And I was like, I didn't have this problem for a while, but now we're hiring CTOs. We just don't call them CTOs. And man, it's extremely difficult to find somebody who is deeply technically knowledgeable. Because I believe, and I guess most technical people believe, in leaders who know their craft, not just a manager that knows how to speak well. They want somebody who knows their stuff, that can manage people, that can communicate well, that want to be managers. One of the things that shocked me, because I'm a software engineer originally. I don't code for a few years, but I'm a software engineer who eventually started learning the world of sales and business and management and stuff like that. And I love it. And it's hard for me sometimes to forget that most people that are talented technical people, they're very happy like that. And becoming managers is a pain in the butt. And they know it. And the job market is so hot that they know they can make very good salary, they can work very flexibly from home, from Hawaii, from wherever they want. And most of us say yes to whatever because it's so hard to find this talent, that they say, now I have to be a manager and hire people and fire people and kind of tell them if they're meeting or not meeting the expectations and manage up to my bosses or to the salespeople and the marketing people. Many people know this is not fun and they don't want to do that. So finding this leader / business / technical profile that we call CTOs is extremely difficult, and I forgot about that for a few years.
One of the things that I think that we share here, and we obviously share the privilege of being software engineers. We've been technical enough for so many years. You've been CTO in your previous company. And when hiring for developers, one of the things I've learned throughout the years is that there are several motivations, right? Some people want fame and money. Some people want impact and they want to work on products that have billions of users. They just want to build stuff for fucking Uber and things like that. And some people just want to learn from somebody else. Like a lot of developers just want to work for this CTO or for this technical CEO, right? So I think that maybe you haven't experienced this struggle of hiring people until now, because now literally you're hiring, doubling your capacity. Until now, because you are a technical reference in the Ruby community. You have got a podcast.
Pau, my co-founder, is.
Yeah.
I used to be.
But you were the CTO of you were the CTO of Teambox, then Red Booth, right? But have you, or Pau has been now is the CTO, right? So let's focus on this part.
Yeah.
How are you leading this? How are you managing this leadership of a tech community, startup community, with your podcast at ITNIC as well, with the other companies that you have created in the ITNIC ecosystem, with your co-working space that you've got with the office at Syria Coffee and whatnot? How does that all factor in your hiring strategy?
So I guess
It's a very long question, I know.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And you're just highlighting all the weird things that we do, co-working, cafeterias, software. So I think it's different from hiring and then engaging and retaining the talent, right? So I think for hiring, this very strong craftsman who people follow and they know he's probably the best developer in the room is really important, right? So people like developers, software developers tend to admire and follow really skilled people more than managers and leaders, right?
Correct.
So I think for us, in the top of the pipeline, right, in the top of the funnel, where we attract candidates to consider joining Factorial, having this CTO that is really good in his craft really helps. And that's great, you hire them, but that's not enough because the labor market is so hot. All of our developers are receiving offers for like double the salary that we pay. And we don't pay poorly, but there's just companies like Facebook and Google and Netflix and Amazon, like they pay ridiculous amounts, like Shopify now, they're all hiring remotely and you have to compete with these companies and you cannot compete on salary because you're dead. They pay hundreds of thousands of euros, you know, for some technical profiles, which is very hard to compete against. And then it comes the mission of the company. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they cared about helping organizations manage their people better and generate data and insights for, which is what we do. It's having a strong mission and feeling it and living it every day in all of the decisions, knowing that the teams are motivated with the same mission is extremely important. I've seen teams, and when we went fully remote because of the COVID starting, we suffered a lot from this because we didn't rely on our ability to communicate in the room constantly. We relied on what happened in the Zoom meetings. And we're not in all the Zoom meetings, right? So some managers were now the only voice for 90% of the time on this, repeating the mission and keeping people motivated and engaged, and we suffered. In some teams we detected suddenly people were disconnected. Not literally disconnected, but they lost their fire. You know, they weren't fighting, you know, going the extra mile and getting extra creative and doing whatever it takes. They were doing a good job and that was fine, but that's not fine for us. So we had to revert this. And it went back to, it's not compensation, it's not perks, it's not benefits, it's not all of this nice stuff that we need to do anyway. It's making sure we repeat over and over, you know, what our culture is, what our mission is, and we make sure everybody lives it. From top to bottom. And yes, there is a hierarchy in this case, from the founders to the leadership, to the directors, to the managers, to everybody at the end involved in the production of the software or whatever the product is.
We're going to go into the management part because I think that's really interesting, related to culture a little bit later. But there's a couple of strategies I wanted to share here because I know for a fact that you follow one. When companies hit a certain scale and they have lots of VC money, they're flush with cash, there are two things that they can do also to hire developers at scale. One of them is to adopt open source projects. And, you know, kind of like Heroku adopted Ruby, and they have the creator of the Ruby language in their company working full-time for them, right? And some other big-time libraries that, you know, they're out there. The companies say, like, okay, we're going to adopt this because we know that we're going to be having their contributors, their leaders, and all of their following, which is potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands of users. And you know that because you are in this scene, right? And the second one, which is the one that you have employed recently, is you bought a technical team, like a development agency called Codegram from the whereabouts here in Barcelona, right? What was your, you know, what's the outcome of this? Is it too early to see the ROI from this? I think it was closed in December. Is that something that maybe from a certain stage companies can also investigate this because the developers market is very scarce right now?
Yeah. So hiring talent in general is one of our bottlenecks. We're lucky to have capital, and we have a very large market, right? So our ability to serve this market is our constraint, basically. And most of it is people, you know, like people who help us build content, sell, talk to people, or build a software that we're eventually selling to them. And technical talent is extremely difficult, so it's always one of our constraints. So when we have the opportunity to consider acquiring a company that's basically an already built team that we know is compatible with our culture. It's not obvious, but it's tricky, so I can go deeper into that.
Because you had been working with them from
We've known them
company.
for over 10 years. We've contracted them a few times, and we know that they work together as a team. We reduce a lot of risks, right? So we reduce the risk of, if it's 20 people, 20 different recruitment processes and onboardings, and then them getting along with other people we know which is higher. We acquire a company with 20 product builders, we put them together, and we know we have 20 successful product builders that work together. So that's why we did it. It obviously comes at a cost, but it reduces a lot of risk, and it reduces a lot of time that it takes to find these people, onboard them, train them, like make sure that they fit into the culture. Now there are challenges as well, which is that you're merging, you're adding one culture into the other, because we're similar, we know each other, we like each other, but they're different companies. Like we praise our culture every day. Like I always talk about why we do things and why we exist and stuff like that in our company, and all of our leadership team and managers in the company do that all the time. So people self-selected for this culture. Now, when we acquire a company, the employees in this company didn't choose to come to Factorial.
They didn't.
The employees didn't. The employees choose to work at a company.
Yeah.
We acquired this company, that suddenly they work
so
at Factorial.
There was not a kind of agreement for like, we're buying the whole team, there's a price for, according to how many people join, or things like that.
Yeah, so people can quit and they cannot join if they want, but in general, people say, I'm going to see how it goes.
Yeah.
So they're suddenly in a company that they didn't really choose, and they didn't spend months considering working there.
Yeah, correct.
And that integration is, it's not obvious. It takes a few months, and of course, a little bit of extra care.
That is a perfect segue to go into company culture. I know that you're super passionate about that. And you were touching on management, right? Because one of the things that you're facing most difficulties on, and as we're talking about today, is managing and hiring, right? In hypergrowth. One of the challenges that I found over the years, and I see it in Start Prime, for instance, and you probably are facing this at Factorial, is one thing that probably is how to make the company culture and the management style trickle down from the founders or leadership team to the lower categories, right? The lower ranks of management. What's your strategy to follow, and how has this changed from your previous company? I always like to contrast, because Redwood was 10 years ago, probably, so it changed, right?
Yeah, everything changed, I guess.
Everything changed, 10 years.
So a couple of kind of things that shocked me, and maybe shock you as well. One is last year, 2021, we were 100 people in the company, coming from 40 the previous year, so like growing fast. Now we're 570 plus people with 100 managers. So suddenly, there is 100 people in our company that have the responsibility to hire other people, to onboard them, to train them, to let them go if they're not up to expectations, to talk about career development, like spread the culture, all of this stuff, and these 100 people are either new in the company or new at management or both.
Yeah.
So the risk and the extreme tension in these circumstances is very large. So yes, that's my top concern at the moment, is how do we keep operating well? How do we maintain the company culture with this setup, with 100 managers that are new in the company, many of them, because at this growth, almost everybody's new, and they're new as management, because one of the things that we promote a lot is developing people internally, right? So we promote very fast, and that comes with a huge cost. So we do a lot of things. You asked what's the strategy. I don't think I have one strategy. We have one strategy, but we have a lot of rituals to further our culture and to develop our managers. We over-communicate extremely. We're starting now to scale this, not just in one-on-ones and in all-hands meetings, which is the two main tools that we had previously. But now we almost have a podcast internally. We actually literally have a podcast only for our managers. We have a podcast with 100 people listening to them. It's Bernat, my co-founder, my other co-founder, who talks weekly about topics, and they're private topics only for managers, as if they were in an MBA or something like that, learning about management. And then whenever we learn that something is impactful and useful, then we open it up to all of our audience, like publicly in our public podcast and for our customers and audience as well. But it's basically how do we maintain the culture alive, and how do we fix it each time it breaks, which is constantly at this fast growth.
One of the sad things I've seen, like for instance, I'm an investor, right? And in one of the companies I invested in, there are probably like 20 people, and the developers, they're like, we don't know the CEO. That's the worst thing you can do as a startup founder, right? And I know for a fact, for instance, that you do exactly the opposite. You get coffee with every new hire that you do, right? That certainly doesn't scale, or it's going to create a lot of health issues for you. So I can like advise to do like group things or something. But like how are you scaling yourself? How are you duplicating yourself, replicating, making yourself obsolete so that you can, because at a certain point there's a trade-off, right? You want to scale, you certainly cannot be on top 100% perfectly on everything. And as a founder, I know it's kind of like, yeah, but I have to do this because it's my company. If I don't do this, it will be perceived as like I'm too elitist or arrogant or whatever, but you cannot get coffee with 1,000 people a year, right? What other things can you do? What other things are you doing yourself to kind of like force yourself to delegate, learn how to let go of stuff that you wanted to do as a CEO but cannot afford to do anymore?
So 2 things. One is that CEO of a 20 people company, I don't know who you're talking about, who the developer doesn't know, either has a very good reason or is a huge douchebag.
That's a huge problem.
I don't think that makes any sense, honestly.
That's a huge problem.
I don't think that makes any sense.
No.
I do meet everybody who joins the company. I don't do that immediately because there is a backlog, and like the last few weeks, we're incorporating 40 to 50 people every week. Yeah. So like it takes logistics. It's a lot of coffees. I don't do them one by one anymore. I do little groups. The little groups were 3 people. They're now like 7, 8 people, and we all introduce each other. We tell our lives, and I tell my life and the story behind the company, and it creates a personal connection. And I also use this as an opportunity to repeat why we exist, what's our mission, what we've learned, and how we operate, you know, and how I am as a person, because I feel it's important that we all know each other to the extent it's possible. That scales to a point. You know, we might need to do this, I don't know, with like a little theater like this with 100 people at a time. I don't know. It sucks. It's not the same, but if we have to, we'll do it. I will not stop doing it, but I will need to find scalable ways. Now, to the other part of your question about letting go, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
We're way too many people doing way too many things for me to be involved in most of them, right?
Yep.
So you kind of do random sampling. I need to know what the company challenge. I always think about what the company challenges are. Top, not all of them, because there's a lot of challenges, but what are the top challenges for the company? And they can be in any random area. And then I try to go as deep as I can in this area, talk to everybody involved, learn about it, and then I don't mess with it because that would create a lot of chaos, but I go back to my area of influence, which is the leadership team, and we talk about that. But having learned from everybody in the detail. Now, I know that we do many things that I just hear about when they're done, and that's great, you know, because it means I'm not the bottleneck. That was tricky 2 years ago when we were starting into the 50 to 100 people. Since then, that ship has sailed. It's obvious that you cannot be involved in most of the things your company does. It just, think about it, you know, 1 person versus 500 plus. You know.
It's like I want to write on the company blog. It's like it's not your fucking job anymore. Like your job is to lead a company of 1,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, if I have something to write about, I'll write about it, and then I'll ask somebody, how do I put this in the blog? Honestly, I don't even know how to put it in the blog, but then somebody will kindly help me.
But not every week, right? I think there's a lot of stuff that we could go into, and you know, there's a lot of startups here you can learn from. But I want to make something different here. And I think that you're particularly great at explaining your fuck-ups. And I think like there's something everybody will be talking about how great their teams are, how amazing their startups are, and how good of a manager they are. But let's humanize ourselves here for a minute. What fuck-up can you share like that has happened in the last few months that you say, like, okay, I can share this. It's going to be valuable for all these people. Because the fact that we're on stage doesn't mean that we don't know all the things. It's that you know, that we've been invited on stage. So if there's one thing that you can share for people here so that they can potentially avoid this fuck up when they hit scale next year or in a few months, which one would it be?
Well, I don't think you can avoid fuck ups. I think they're part of life. But
they will not feel like shit when they have it, right?
Yeah, no, you do learn a little bit. And you try not to repeat them. I think you always do, but at least you do new ones. I mean, we've done so many. I guess choosing one is hiring at the top.
Hiring at the top, okay.
That is not a fuck up per se. Sometimes it's necessary. Again, as I said before, we try to develop people, we try to promote from within, but sometimes people are not ready to promote. And they either give up. I've seen many people who say, I don't want to be the boss. I don't want to be the manager, director, VP, because I'm not ready, because for whatever reason, and I think that's reasonable, but at least you tension them until they either succeed or they, you know, make space for somebody else. But then I've done and we've done collectively many fuck-ups hiring people at the top, where we found somebody with an impeccable track record, where you look at the LinkedIn or the CV and you know you go deep and you talk to the person and it's like, how did you do that? And wow, it checks all the boxes. You know, like this person has really done what I need to do. you get really excited about that. You need that person yesterday. The person who you wanted to lead this just gave up, and you just hire them right away. And you fast track everything. You skip references. You just push them in. And the team rejects it because you haven't considered, or I didn't consider, we didn't consider the company culture fit well enough. I don't like the concept of culture fit, but there is a thing there. There are people who are compatible and incompatible with people. There are people who lead with tyranny and, you know, like you would do in the military. And there is people who lead with
consensus.
Well, I don't like consensus, but people who lead from, as you said, a position of, you know, weakness and, you know, like showing all of yourself and stuff like that. And if you bring the two people together, they're not going to work well with each other, right? So we did fuck-ups like this recently, and luckily we could contain the damage. Just had to replace this person, but we didn't lose the whole team. Because if you don't react fast enough, like I had once, it took me 4 months once to react to a fuck up like this, also bringing somebody at the top and giving them a second chance and then a third chance. And in a startup, that's 4 months. And then I had to let this person go. And I almost lost the whole team that this person reported to. Actually, two key people that reported into this person told me months later that they had the draft in their emails telling me that they were leaving the day after.
Oh.
I told them that I let this person go. So luckily, I didn't take 1 day too long.
That's painful, but of course, their fuck-ups are part of the process, part of the voyage. I wanted to thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And also, one thing I wanted to share, if you like this content, we actually had a conversation between Factorial and Marspace last week in their podcast, in the ITNIC podcast. It's really good content. We talked about this, hiring devs and company cultures. You want to check it out, go with it, because for me personally, that's a reference listening to this podcast. So thank you very much, Jordi. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alex.